Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode number 13, and today we're going to speak about what's happening on our farms, and then we're going to discuss our financing specifically. I'm Morgan Hayes. I'm an assistant professor in ag engineering here at University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, about 500 acres with my husband, and we focus on a hay and commercial cattle operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems ag engineering, focused on precision livestock farming. And I farm in Mercer County. We raise registering as cattle and focus on some hay production.
Okay, Josh, let's go ahead and get started today with a little bit about what's been happening on the farm. We've been at Farm Machinery Show, so we've actually been off for about 2 weeks now.
So been at Farm Machinery Show, still doing a lot of repairs on equipment. We put out some feed in our creep feeders for our calves and getting ready to think about weaning them. So we kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit, and so we're actually going to wean in March.
Yeah, we've been actually looking at early March for our weaning as well, so I sort of agree with you. The weather this week has been a little bit wild. We had about 2 inches of rain yesterday, and so our strategy over the last couple weeks between my husband's traveling and then my commitment at Farm Machinery Show has been to make sure we had hay out in advance and appropriate amounts, especially on the one farm where we don't have winter feeding areas, concrete feeding areas, and we have harder time accessing those fields. So that's been our big push. Other things that we're working on is we're getting ready to sell our calves that we weaned in the fall. So
Okay.
our spring herd, we're selling our calves here at the beginning of March in order to wean our next group of calves into our barn. So we have a little bit going on right now, just making sure we get the best price we can on those calves and get them sold. Not too early, hopefully, when the market has some demand, but it looks like prices right now are pretty decent for some heavier weight calves, so holding them this winter was probably a good decision. Not always the case, but currently it looks like a positive decision.
It's one of those financial risks you always take. You hope for the best, but you've known it the worst. Sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, this one's generally, I think, a better risk. I think if you look at the market year after year, prices are better in the spring than they are in, say, October, November. And by the time we get them properly weaned, we're really looking at early November for a sale date. So for us, it's usually a pretty safe gamble to hold them until February, March. But we are at that point now where they're getting heavy enough. Our bigger ones are up in the 7s, our lighter ones are in the heavy 6s. So we have a pretty good size group, and it's about time to sell so we don't end up with animals that are too large for what the market demands here in Kentucky.
Okay. And we kind of are also focused on selling a couple bulls. So a couple of our bulls, it's that kind of that time of year people are starting to think about, when do I need a bull, getting ready for the spring. Some people are already starting to make that plan as well. So we're, getting the bulls. And I think you're still doing some of the freezer beef as well. You got some slaughtered.
Yep, we had 2 slaughtered, and we actually picked them up. One of them we had sold before we slaughtered, so one of them's already gone. The other one's in the freezer. We've sold parts of that one, but not the whole, so we have probably, I don't know, we still probably have about 3/4 of that one to sell, at least a little bit more than half, so
Additional income streams coming in that way.
absolutely, yeah. The nice thing about finishing those animals is that there's a little bit more money, but it also comes in a little bit more spaced out over the year. So let's go ahead and I know everyone's still doing repair work and feeding animals, but let's talk a little bit about financing. We're sort of at that point in the year, especially like you said, weaning, selling calves, doing some of that. A lot of income is probably going to start coming in the next few weeks as we get animals sold. How do you run financing on your operation?
So it's a little bit mixed. We have we actually just refinanced the house and farm probably this past January. I started that back in December because we were going through the engineering economics class, and we got to thinking, it's like, okay, here's a 30-year and 15-year, and I got to thinking, I got the property probably about 6 years ago. And then looking at interest rates now on a 15-year, I mean, it was almost a no-brainer to switch over from that aspect to like a much lower APR, and it's going from a 30-year to 15-year, and just a much lower APR. It went from 4.3 to 2.25.
Wow.
The payments are almost the same, and I just cut out 10 years off of that loan.
Wow, that's impressive.
And so that was something to think about. From part of it was, we had to finance the house and farm, but then also we look at equipment. When I first started out, got my first baler probably 10 years ago. Actually, I went to some of the agricultural related credit bureaus, and I went to the agriculture related credit ones. I'm not going to name them, but like they said, "Ooh, you're going to have a much higher APR if I was getting this baler on my own," because I didn't have much of a credit history. And so at that point, I had to actually go to FSA route,
Okay.
or and through USDA and get that much lower interest rate, actually appropriate interest rate for a baler loan. So I kind of beginning farmer, didn't have much assets, and then put some of the cattle as collateral, and I was able to get a loan that way.
Yeah.
And so then finally got it paid off probably about last year.
Yeah, we must be in very similar situations because we really grew the farm pretty aggressively in 2014 to 2016. And last year in 2021, we paid off, between 2020 and 2021, we paid off a significant number of smaller loans. So officially, we don't have any equipment loans outstanding right now. We grew our herd very aggressively on our cattle. So we had a large cattle note, and that one is now gone as well. That was a 5-year note. So now we're in the spot where we're really just paying on our operating line and our mortgages, which is a much better position to be in. It's not been an easy market to be trying to cover equipment loans and cattle loans. The market has not been particularly strong for the last few years. We've been pretty strategic. That's one reason we have been holding our calves over winter, to put a little weight on and hopefully get a little bit higher price in the spring, because all of that money immediately goes back into our cattle. It went back into our cattle note up until this year. So that was how we were able to pay off the cattle note, was by using the money from the calves. So we're in a little bit better position now to strategically use that money to both make sure our operating line holds at zero. It's just sort of over time absorbed some small pieces of equipment that weren't worth taking out equipment loans. And it also handles all of our hay purchasing, where any hay that we bring into the farm goes through that operating line as well. So right now we're just making sure that that one gets zeroed out this year. We're looking at a potential market where inflation could be occurring, and certainly interest rates are probably going to go up this year. So we're doing everything in our power right now to try and take down some of our debt.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to some of the grain guys talk, and they said there's, that for them, they have a number. We just try to keep, we know that with the farming, it's, asset rich, cash poor. And so we just try to keep, as much stuff paid off as possible.
Yeah, I think that's most farmers' goals, but the reality is there's almost always a cash need on a farm, and so a lot of people have some form of operating line, or they run credit at a store.
Yep.
They're either purchasing fertilizer and paying for it later, or purchasing seed and paying for it later. Very few people pay cash up front for everything in farming. It's just unusual. Certainly for beginning farmers right now, I think this has been a pretty challenging time, and it continues to be. And input costs are quite high right now, so it's a real trick, I think, for younger farmers that are still sort of in the throes of a lot of debt. And I feel for them, because we are still in the throes of quite a bit of debt, but certainly, we have good jobs. That helps. We're very lucky, Josh, that we have good jobs that allow us to support our farming.
Yep.
And allow us to get loans at better rates than we would if we were full-time farmers.
Yeah, because that is the thing, because you show that you have that other stream of income.
Yep.
And so that does allow you to get a little better rates on those loans. And we for our fertilizer, we go through southern states and get their credit and get the fertilizer, and we're purchasing fertilizer in spring. And last year we applied at probably half the rate that the fields were asking for. I'm not even sure we're going to be able to do that this year, just with the way things look.
And how do you sort of budget out how much money you can spend on, say, fertilizer, or I know we talk about repairs here a lot, about all these things. How does your farm budget sort of account for some of that?
You know, we the things that are flexible, we try to, some of the repairs are, I'd like to say avoidable, but like some of them just happen when we have to conduct repairs. We have to have equipment function we needed to. So really, we're trying to keep repairs as low as possible, 2,000 to 3,000, but we know it usually averages about 5, a year. And then, and the way I say sometimes, I talk to producers and talk with them, if however much you spend on the equipment overall purchase price, maybe 5 to 10% of that could be on repairs. And we have a lot of older equipment, so it's actually going to be a little higher just because we have that old equipment. Most of our tractors, 2 of our tractors, 1976s, one's a 1990. So
yeah, and we have sort of similarly, we have older tractors. We have a couple newer tractors. We actually made some purchases in the last year or two that were, I don't know, not necessarily planned well, which is, maybe not a good thing to acknowledge, that we made sort of impulse purchases on some equipment, but we expanded the number of tractors we had to have some backup and redundancy so that when something goes down, something else can operate. But the reality is that means we have more pieces of equipment to maintain. And so we haven't quite figured out what repair costs look like now that we have all that extra equipment. Despite the fact that we know we should be budgeting more, we just haven't quite made our budget work to the number of tractors, because we moved from somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3 tractors to now we have 6 or 7, depending on if you count my sort of family tractors, ones that aren't owned by us, but that we sometimes utilize.
So, yeah, we've already just had kind of the 3, but we've slowly increased over the years. And so, like those tractor purchases, I think if it becomes available, sometimes you almost have to jump on opportunities. If there's a reasonable price, I think in this market, you almost have to jump on those and take those opportunities to get that equipment, because it's definitely really hard to justify a newer piece of equipment.
It is harder to justify new, and you're right. And for us, we wanted redundancy on a couple specific size pieces of equipment. Having a backup tractor to be able to run a baler is important. And we only had one tractor that was large enough to run a baler. And because hay operation is actually our larger income stream feeding back into the farm, not being able to get hay baled because a tractor was down was unacceptable. Similarly, we have smaller tractors we use in loading and unloading hay, but from an efficiency standpoint, we need to have 2 loader tractors to load and unload the hay so that we can haul our hay in quick enough to not leave it out in the field if there is rain coming. And our windows, it seemed like, are getting shorter. So it was an impulse purchase. It was not a dumb purchase. It was a good price. And my husband just sent me a listing on Craigslist or somewhere, and a similar tractor, by the time we outfitted the one to match our other one, it was about $10,000 less than one that was for sale currently in the area. So I feel like it was still a good purchase. It was a good price, and it was not a bad investment. But certainly, we're still in that phase where we're still trying to get our financing a little bit cleaner, get debt knocked out. It wasn't necessarily our ideal time to purchase, but like you said, sometimes you purchase when it's available.
When it's available, and it's not always going to be convenient. And another challenge from this past year is it's actually been taxes gone up. Well, to some degree, I think they just actually have a relief. I think the governor signed an executive order to relieve of vehicle taxes for trucks and for trucks, and registrations had gone up significantly. So some of them, I think they were talking maybe 40% on vehicles across the board. And then, for farmers, this can be, that's additional challenge.
Yeah, but I think, for those who are listening and maybe not in Kentucky actually considers a vehicle a personal piece of property, and it takes tax sort of similarly to a lot of houses in a county. So we pay on the value of our vehicles each year when we register them. Which is a little bit tricky. A lot of states don't do that. As a person who came from another state, I find that sometimes surprising, but that is true. That is how they get taxed, at least here in Kentucky. So not necessarily ideal when that tax basis goes up by 40% in a year. So it is good that there was a little bit of relief provided. So at least people have time to anticipate that rise in taxes. Because it was, if you had one vehicle, it was possibly problematic. If you were a farmer and you have 2 trucks, 2 cars, 3 trailers, another large truck, all of a sudden it was a lot of extra money coming out here. And for us, we pay all of that in March. That's when all farm tagged vehicles get billed.
And so luckily they took it back to 2021 values, because even my F-350 went from quote unquote $20,000 value to $25,000 value. So it was, I made hypothetical, it increased in values by $4,000, but it also increased my taxes.
Sure. So anyway, that is a trick, is to try and figure out how all of that's going to work. And for us, I don't know how your taxes work, but in terms of your financing, we tend to get money back because we have pretty large deductions. It's just the nature of having purchased farms recently, making a lot of capital improvements. We have a lot of depreciation that we're sitting on right now. So that's one of those areas where we tend to get money back. But it is also an area where we can use that money strategically to either invest in more infrastructure on the farm, or we can choose to use it to pay off debt. I'm just curious how that works on your farm.
We do get some money back, because we also have been putting a lot of fence and other fence, waterers, buildings. So we have a lot, and still more new equipment. Not new equipment, new to me equipment. And so we've tried to think about, when we budget, we get some of that money back, but we're trying to budget, a year in advance. We have allocated for feed. Resource is going to be a major one. Feed is going to be a major resource. Fertilizer is going to be a major resource, because we're trying, we're essentially buying hay when we're putting down the fertilizer. That's pretty much how we justify it. We're buying hay when we put it down. And then just repairs is another big one, just because older equipment having to do that. And we try to offset that. I've mentioned in the past, I think, that we, go to filters. We use the filter sales whenever the local dealership has a filter sale. We try to get all of our filters at once for the entire year.
Yeah. We sort of do something similar, not so much with filters, but we purchase our fuel in bulk. So our diesel fuel we just filled. My husband will tell you that I asked him to delay on purchasing it, and that was a mistake. We lost money in that process, and makes him really happy to say that I was wrong when I suggested that. Josh is laughing, but he's met my husband, so he can.
I can vouch. Yeah,
he can vouch for me on that one. But the reality is that we do try and bulk purchase, one, for a cheaper cost, and also we try to be strategic about when to buy it based upon what the prices are doing. And while it was more expensive when we purchased it, it's more expensive again now. So there is a little bit of that type of strategy as well. And, just getting things, if we can, when the prices are better. That's the trick with fertilizer this year, is that we haven't been able to pre-purchase, and we haven't been able to get really solid prices that we're really confident on. We're now coming into the market where we're starting to get to that point. But those prices are very high, so it's going to be a very large discussion about how much to spend. And like you said, that might be where some tax dollars actually go, is making those decisions.
We even struggled this year. It's like, do we even soil sample? Do we even, I think we will. But we're actually going to have to soil sample here in the next couple of weeks, because we lost the Princeton station. So they're saying that most of the sample is going to have to go here to Lexington Regulatory Service. And so there could be a backlog as far as soil samples go. And then, we're going to still soil sample, but I think, probably just looking at the lime, trying to get the lime, making sure the lime is where it needs to be. And, maybe just the bare minimum of some DAP and potash if needed. No nitrogen, I don't think.
Yeah.
But we have been investing, that's the other aspect, we have been investing a lot to the clover seed, putting a lot of clover out, just broadcasting right now as much as we can.
I think that's probably a good strategy, to try and get some nitrogen fixation through a legume. I think that's probably very smart on your part. Yeah, I think in general, it's going to be a tricky year for financing. I'm very grateful that we're sort of out from a number of our debts, but there's certainly more to come. And I think for a lot of people, they've refinanced in the last couple of years, in the last year or two. And like you said, the interest rates have been very good. I spoke to a friend the other day, someone I haven't spoken to in a little while, and he commented that they made the command decision to purchase a farm. They weren't sure that they were ready, but they said if they didn't buy now, they thought it could be 10 years before interest rates in the market really allowed them to purchase again. And I hope that's not true. I am not a market forecaster. I don't know what interest rates are going to do long term. I don't know how this market is going to behave, but I certainly think in the short term for the next couple years, interest rates could be quite a bit higher as they start climbing in the next so many months. I don't anticipate that they're not going up at this point.
They got to go up, in my opinion. With inflation being the way it is they got to go up. And you know, watch some other, you know, talking at farm show, you know, the propane cost has gone up 40%, or natural gas cost gone up 40%, and our fertilizer cost gone up 240%. I think was the numbers they were quoting me.
Yeah, and if you look at how we make some of our nitrogen fertilizers and how energy intensive that process is, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So.
And other thing, you know, talking a little bit about the repairs, I brought in a couple pieces from my cutter here. And so I have my V tine for my off of my flow conditioner of my Chrome. So I mentioned a couple weeks ago when we were talking about repairs, you know, going through that machine, taking off tines, but we got the V tine. I wanted to show off the difference here. So one that's not quite a V. So I have a part that's, if you're listening to the podcast, don't have any video, it's pretty much half a V. So, you know, it's half broke, and then there's some that were completely missing. So there's part of these repairs, and, you know, it's a fairly large hole, and it's missing its bushing as well. So a lot of it, you know, thinking even these the cost of this tine here, you know, last year $55, this year $62 as of about a week ago, and you know, I can only assume that's going to go up. So a lot of stuff, you know, it's going up, and so it's not cheap. You know, this is something that we don't think about a lot. It's the oil conditioners, but you know, they do wear out. And even though it's just, you know, you think to yourself, it's just hitting grass, it's metal, it should be tough. You know, you have to replace those bushings, have to replace those bolts. A lot of it, you know, just taking care of that general maintenance. And so that's another, you know, we mentioned it, you know, we actually, so this cost that's planned, we actually had to replace a tire. Was going flat on it. So that's kind of an unplanned repair and maintenance.
Yeah, we similarly had a tire go really get blown completely on our manure spreader, and those are not cheap tires to replace. We ended up purchasing a set of used tires from someone, a whole set of 4, recognizing that we only really needed one. But if we need to replace any other tires, it was better to buy a whole set of 4 that match, that were all, I forget what they are, if they're 10 ply or more. Actually, I think they're a little bit heavier than that even, and they're larger tires. For those people that don't know, manure spreaders have larger float tires on them. They're, you know, they're typically, you know, on a vehicle, you'd have something like an R17, an R15, a radial size like that. And on these tires, they're more like a 22, 24. They're a much larger tire, a lot more material in them, a little bit more aggressive banding in the sidewalls of them, and a lot of plies on the part that actually hits the ground. And they're almost like an airplane tire, but bigger. So they are quite expensive to purchase, and they're difficult to find. They're also difficult to find someone to install them, because most people don't have equipment to replace them on a rim easily. So you have to find the right service person to do that type of a replacement on a tire. So, and they are tubed. So there's a lot of work to go into replacing a tire. It doesn't seem like there would be that much cost and time and energy associated with it, but a trip to Indiana to pick up tires, a trip, you know, 2 counties up to get the tire replaced, plus the tube, plus.
Yep, it all adds up. You know, a little something you think would be simple, then it's not quite.
Exactly. It's kind of amazing how much money you can spend on a repair that seems like it shouldn't be that expensive, but it's necessary. It's what makes the farm operate, and unfortunately, it's much harder to budget for these types of things than it is in maybe your household budget. So if you've never operated a farm, it's a very tricky dynamic to actually put a dollar amount to it, because some years you'll be doing really good for a while, and then you'll have one catastrophic break that will take up your whole income that you have budgeted for it, and then some years you'll nickel and dime out, and you'll be done in June, and you'll have run out of money, and you just have to keep going because you can't afford to have that equipment down. So it is a little bit tricky. It does make the financing a little bit more challenging. It's a reason to have off-farm income. I don't really want to tell people that that's the reality, but that is the reality for younger farmers, is that
You have to have some outside revenue stream to help you get started, because it's really
and to help you maintain on a year that's not going well.
Yeah.
So certainly for a beginning farmer where there's a lot of debt, that becomes absolutely essential. But even I think as you get further along, having a strategy to bring in a secondary income stream, if it is a year where you need that, I think is important for a lot of farmers. And that's why they have second jobs, or they help with fencing, or they do other things on the side, is just to bring in that extra income when they need it.
Yeah, because one of the things we also found out when we replaced the tire was that they took it off, hadn't been replaced in years. The rim was also bad. So
Yep.
It's all the little stuff. You think it's going to be one thing, and it snowballs.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Okay. Well, with that, Josh, do you want to just give anyone a little bit of an update on what you're doing for the next week or so, and then?
This next week we're going to be still getting a lot of rain, so probably trying to go between the rains, putting out hay, taking care of cattle, and probably starting to get ready for weaning. So we wean them close to the barn. We fence line wean, so we put all the calves back behind our barn, and then let the cows come and nuzzle them, and still talk to them. But it seems to be probably the best way for us. So probably getting ready for weaning, getting everything set up, the fence lines inspected, and then from there, just still repairing equipment.
Yeah, and we'll be sort of similarly getting ready to wean, but one of the big things that we'll be doing in the next week is getting prices for selling the calves that are currently in the barn, the ones that we weaned in the fall, because we need them out in that barn clean and dry before we bring in new younger calves for that next weaning. So this week is our target week for getting the other animals sold. And then also with that, we have some heifers that we're going to retain. So we have to make decisions about the heifers being retained, as well as the couple steers we're going to retain to try and finish. So we'll be making those final decisions this week. And of course, we will be feeding cattle as well, because this rain makes it so interesting, and they certainly are cranking through hay right now.
Yeah, I think, Matt Dix and I looked at it the other day. I think we're at 4 inches prior to the 2 inches of rain. So I think, if we finish out this month 6 or 7 inches, I will not be surprised.
Yeah, and 6 or 7 inches, for those of you that don't know, our average rainfall here in February is just shy of 4 inches. So we're not quite to double, but if the rest of this week doesn't go well, we could be at double.
Yeah.
A normal monthly rainfall, which is not unusual in Kentucky in February. We seem to have luck like this often, unfortunately, at least in the few years I've been living here.
Yeah, 2018, we had the 10 inches of rain in 2018. So that was really wet, and it was definitely a challenge putting out hay.
Absolutely. So hopefully not 10 inches this month. Hopefully we can keep it under that number. But we are still looking at another wet February here, and we'll be busy trying to keep things dry. We will see you guys next week with another video and podcast.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.